Hello, I'm Jude Scott, and today we're going to go over again the tones that go to make up white roses. I've called this 50 Shades of White. I've got many shades of white mixed up here near the demo rose, and I really hope that you will enjoy going through them with me. I've mixed up the first column on the left is all different tones of grey. Then I've gone to the warmer tones of grey, almost a mauve, and then along the bottom I've used different yellows. I've used Aureolin Yellow and Quinacridone Gold to mix up greens and yellows, and then the last three tiles have got just a warm neutral grey mixed in with them. I've used these tones to produce a painting that you can see it's three-dimensional. So if you're going to do a rose that's got you want it to look three-dimensional, you have to have tones. So as you can see with the real rose that's on the top left-hand corner of the paper, it's got many different tones in it, as has the little bunch of rosebuds just by the palette. So if you mix equal parts of any three primary colours, you'll end up with grey. So here I'm using Cobalt Blue. I'm using all Holbein colours to produce these 50 shades of white. So I've used Cobalt Blue 290. I'm using Aureolin Yellow with a dash of Quinacridone Gold, and I'm using permanent alizarin crimson. So the first grey is very unexciting, but that's what I want. I want just a very neutral grey, not warm, not cool, just neutral. So as I'm going further to the left, I'm adding a little bit more Cobalt Blue, just a very small amount, because these pigments by Holbein are very strong, so you don't need a lot of pigment. So on the far left there, you can see that's the final one. It's quite cool, and there's a natural progression of the grey becoming cooler as I move along. So with the next colour, I've just put a little bit more depth into that, to the master mix of grey. And then this row I'm going to add some permanent alizarin crimson. So this is quite a mauve grey, it's quite warm. So as I go further to the left, I'm going to introduce some cobalt to that to cool it down. It's fine to just add it to the wet pigment that's already on the paper. Some people like to let it mix on the paper. You can get some beautiful results if you let it mix on the paper rather than mix it up furiously in your paint palette. So that's something also that you might like to try. I'm going to add just a touch of cobalt to that so it gets very, very cool as it goes further away from the master mix of the warm grey. Now I'm going to use the Quinacridone Gold and the Aureolin Yellow as we go further away. Here, just mix it up, leave it on the paper. It might look a little bit bright to you at this stage, but it will fade, probably 10% as it dries, because these particular colours are very pale. They don't have a lot of strength of pigment with them, a lot of water. So as they dry, they will fade. If I was using full strength pigment, they wouldn't fade at all. So I've mixed up the yellow, and I'm making it cooler and cooler by adding blue, the cobalt, and you can see it's a pretty close colour to the buds on the left. Certainly not as dark, but the green is the right shade of white. And in those little rosebuds, there's definitely shades of white, and that's what we're sort of aiming for, all the different shades and tones of white that you will need to put in your petals, drop into the painting that you're going to do of your rose. So the next one I'm going to do, I'm going to warm up, just do, use the same colours there. It's a little bit grey, but I'm going to warm it up a bit with some permanent alizarin. So this is going to be a warm grey, which is actually like a very, very pale brown, or a dark cream. And if you look over to the left again, to the buds and to the rose in the top left-hand corner, you can see that it's quite warm in parts. Some of those shadows are cool, some of them have got warm tones of white. So with this colour selection, you'll be able to produce all the tones you need for your rose. I think there's about 17 shades of white. I could go back and even make more, but I think this is enough. You can either add a bit of yellow to these, a bit of blue to cool them down, or a bit more pink to warm them up. So I've just used my 3 basic colours with a dash of Quinacridone Gold to produce all these different 17 tones. Now, I apologise for jumping ahead. I have painted the rose, but that's because 2 reasons for this. The first one is I have actually lost the video that was supposed to be me painting the rose, and I apologise for that, but all is not lost, because in last week's video on how to paint a white rose, I've gone in with that quite in depth. So I think it's about 40 odd minutes of how to paint a white rose. So for those of you who already have watched that and don't want to watch it again, it could be a good thing that I've lost the video clip. So I've forged ahead here, and now I'm just putting some veins in my roses. You can put a vein in with any colour really. Will read as a shadow or a tone on white. So you can put in a blue, and then you can add just the faintest touch of a warm grey to that, and it will really mix beautifully within that vein to give you variations of colour. Into that background now, I'm just adding a bit of water, and I'm going to also add a bit of Quinacridone Gold with that blue to make some stems. And with the Holbein colours that I've used, it creates beautiful, it pushes the pigment away from the surface of the paint on the paper, so you get these channels opening up, and they actually, if you're looking at it close up, it's like a little stem appearing. You can get some terrific marks in your background using that technique. So if you like playing around with texture and experimenting, try doing that with your paint. For the background, I have used Mars Violet mixed with my Cobalt. It makes a beautiful dark. You can also add in some indigo if you want to the background. If I drop in some Quinacridone Gold, because there's quite a lot of blue already in the indigo, you get fantastic, really, really dark greens, like you can see there in some parts. The shadows have actually faded quite a lot on that rose, so I always like to go in with more shadows when the first lot have completely dried. Sometimes if you charge in and put too many shadows in too soon, you can't lift them off very often, and it can be a bit disappointing. So I'm just adding some touches of green to that bud, and you don't have to be too fussy. You can just the little leaves that go around them, I love those little sections of the rosebuds. And you can see, if you cross-check to the real rose, the warm tones, you can see the warm tones in the rose that I'm painting. And now we've switched to the finished rose. All those wonderful shades and different shades of white, different warm and cool tones of white are there for you to see.